Ray has definitely added a lot of value to our organization here at Superior, and I've enjoyed the amount of time I've got to spend with him, learning about Lean and implementing it here at Superior and Keeling and the companies here. So I'm looking forward to what Ray has to say, and I hope all of you glean something from this and about how to become a learning organization, both becoming people who are able to learn, but also having an organization that's able to learn and keep on learning. So Ray, welcome.
All right, is my mic on? Very good. This is working. All right, good. It's good to be with you this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. The lean business culture, the goal of it is this: engage everyone in the organization, everyone, to work as a team to create value with less waste, solve problems at the root cause, and get better every day. And if you know anything about lean, you know that this get better every day, that's the continuous improvement part of it. But really what you're doing in lean, all the tools, all the unusual methods, the purpose of them is to get to this endpoint. This is the end game. Everybody involved in those three things: create value, solve problems, get better. And another way to express that is you become a learning organization. So that's what I'm going to share today. This session is going to explain that goal of lean, what a learning organization is, some of the things that you have to do to become one, and then what the results are when we succeed. So, you ready to go? Let's start by talking about horses. You can tell by looking at me that I'm a horse expert, right? I know a lot about draft horses. No, I'm totally kidding. I did check this out on the internet, and the internet says it's true, so it must be true, right? No, I've checked this out. What I'm about to share with you about the draft horse effect, I've checked this out with horse people, and so far everybody's nodded and said, yeah, this is the real deal. A draft horse, a single draft horse, can pull about twice its own weight on a sled like this. Okay, got that? Twice its own weight. But if you get two draft horses together and have them pulling together, put them together as a team, they can together pull 3 times their combined weight. So they're each contributing, but somehow the output is greater than the sum of what they're contributing. I'm told that if you carefully train that team for, I don't know, a year or some period of time, it can pull 4 times its combined weight. That's the draft horse effect. So, here's the question. Does the same thing work with people? Is there a people effect? If you take people, regular people, not super performers, just regular people, if you take them and they have different gifts and different abilities, if you put them together, can you get greater output? The draft horse effect, or the people effect. Does that happen? My answer is yes, absolutely. I am completely convinced that that is true for a number of reasons. But, and this might be the bad news, it's not automatic. It doesn't happen naturally. Unfortunately, what happens automatically is very much not the draft horse effect. You put a bunch of people together, and Peter Drucker, the management author, he said it this way: only 3 things happen naturally in organizations: friction, conflict, confusion, and underperformance. You put people together, and usually this is what happens naturally unless you work to change it. So, we want to try to create business organizations and get that people effect. Right? That's what we're going for. I think if you think about life, I believe that you will realize that these things are true. This was Drucker's conclusion after a lifetime of studying business. By the way, the end of his quote is this: everything else requires leadership. And what leaders are trying to do is counteract those natural things, suppress them, and get the positive people effect. I think if you think through life, you'll find that yes, this is what happens. You put people together, if you do nothing, they generally devolve into these things. Even in situations where you would expect otherwise. I remember hearing about a story about, on this friction and conflict, a story about a monastery, a Catholic monastery where monks live and do their work, copying manuscripts and praying and serving the poor. And this was a very strict monastery, and in order to have the monks not be distracted, they had a vow of silence. So they weren't allowed to say anything. But with modern times, they decided to relax that just a little bit. So they made a rule that every 7 years, one monk could say something. Okay, so the appointed time came, and the monks ate breakfast together. Of course, silence in the room. And after breakfast, the abbot, the head monk, stood up, and he pointed over to Brother Philip. And it was Philip's turn to say something. So he stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "I don't like the oatmeal here." Sat back down. Well, the monks kind of looked at each other, a bit perplexed, and shrugged and went on for another 7 years, copying manuscripts and praying and good works for the poor. So, sorry, DJ, you distracted me. So the appointed time came again, and after breakfast, the abbot stood up and he pointed over to Brother Andrew, and it was his turn to speak. And he stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "I like the oatmeal here," and sat back down. Once again, the monks looked around, and there's shrugs, and another 7 years of good works. So then the appointed time came around again. The abbot stood up after breakfast, and he pointed over to Brother Bartholomew. Brother Bartholomew stood up, and he said, and Brother Bartholomew, he was one of the best monks. I mean, most devoted to prayer, best at copying manuscripts, and just crazy with good works. And he stood up, everybody was interested in what he would say, and he said, "I'm leaving the monastery." Well, this was so shocking that the abbot broke the vow of silence. And he said, but Brother Bartholomew, you can't leave. Why are you leaving? What's your reason? And he stood back up and he said, "I can't stand this constant bickering over the oatmeal." Put people together. What do you naturally get? Conflict, friction, right? Don't have to look any further than the news headlines each day to see that, right? So, what do you do about it? We want to try to create businesses where people can work together and get that draft force effect, a greater output than the combined input. So, a business is just people using a process to start with some kind of raw material, conduct a series of processes, and produce a final product that customers will value. So people and process producing a product for customers, value for customers. That's a business. That's just the basic design of a business. So in business, we aim to do this, and if we do a good job at If we do well, better than our competitors, you're going to get some happiness, right? You're going to have happy customers. They'll be happy to spend the money. If internally we've set our prices properly, we make some money at it, and you're going to have happy owner. What about the rest? Whoops. What about the rest of them? What about the team? Is the team happy? Unknown. Kind of depends. How did we do it well? What steps did we take to do well at this process, converting raw material into value for customers? There's a number of approaches to doing well as a business. I'm going to contrast what I call the common approach to the lean approach. Both of them start with satisfying customers. I mean, that's the same. No matter what you do, you have to satisfy customers. So I'm not going to contrast that. The common approach is you start with the business equation, right? Profit is revenue, money in, minus expenses, money out. Do you have any left over? Profit. So with this approach is you put your leadership efforts into making the revenue high, making the expenses low, and if you're successful at that, then you've made profit big. Happiness, right? Or at least for some of the stakeholders. So happy customer, happy owner. Team happy? Still unclear. Unsure whether that approach is making them happy. Again, it depends. What did we do to increase revenue? What did we do to lower expenses? If we gave our people mind-numbing work to do, drive them mercilessly to high production, expect them to work around daily frustrations without actually fixing them, just work around them, firefighting, and we treat them like biological robots, well, they're probably not going to be happy. And we may not get that draft force effect. We may not get that people effect that we're going for. We may miss out on a powerful opportunity to do a better job at this process here. There is another way. The lean approach, you don't focus mainly on results. We care about the results, we watch the results, we watch them like a hawk, but that's not the main lever we try to pull. The main lever is we try to engage all the human strengths. The lean approach is let's see how well we can do to get that people effect. If we can engage all the positive things about people, then we can make some progress. So, human beings are funny things. We have those negative tendencies I said earlier, right? Friction, confusion, underperformance. Those are all true. At the same time, people have amazing potential. Consider this list. People are able to work, right? They can do physical work with their muscles. They can do mental work with their minds. They can do creative work with their imagination. They've got the ability to do that. And in my understanding of reality, if they do that and do it successfully, it is generally satisfying to them. People have the ability to form habits and yet to adapt. Okay? If you do the same thing over and over again, eventually your brain and body is such that it's eventually going to become automatic. I've got some new dress shoes. I'm wearing one pair of them this morning, and I noticed I was doing this up and down the hall here. They're longer than my regular shoes, and so the front of them catches on the ground, and I almost trip. So if you see me stumble later, that's probably what's going on. I have spent 60 years walking, and it's become automatic. I don't have to think about it. Okay, now flex this muscle, and now lift up, and then lift up at least this far above the ground. I don't have to think about it. I just do it. Right? It's a habit. It doesn't require any mental energy. So you give me longer shoes, and wife says, you're going to have to lift your feet higher. I think, how am I going to learn to lift my feet higher? This is a 60-year habit. What do I do to, what does one do to do that? I guess wear longer shoes for a while. And so it's a great thing. This is why you can drive a stick shift car and talk about politics at the same time, because the shifting has become automatic, right? Shifting is a complicated process, right? Let off on the accelerator so that you don't race the engine, and as you're pushing the clutch in, that has to be timed properly so you don't race the engine. Reach for the shift lever. Your brain knows which gear you're in and which one you're going to, so you don't have to think about that. Change gears, let off on the clutch, push down on the accelerator so you don't kill the engine, and time that properly, right? That's complicated, but it's automatic. You don't think about it. We have the power to form habit, but we can adapt. We can learn new habits. Even old guys like me, we can learn new habits. That's a powerful human strength. We can make use of that in business. If we teach people the right motions, the right habits of thought, and yet change it when we need to, that's powerful strength and ability. Work in teams. I'm going to say more about teamwork later. You can take differing and complementary gifts of people, put them together, and multiply the output, the people effect. It requires some important attitudes, which I'll get to shortly. But people can work in teams, and it is both very effective when it works and rather satisfying. Teams can form cultures, right? A culture is the set of beliefs and practices that have become automatic in a group of people, and it's what happens naturally. You can form good cultures, you can form bad cultures, right? This can go horribly wrong. Nazi Germany is a great example of it going horribly wrong. It can go great. It can be extremely rewarding for people to be operating together in a good and virtuous culture. The culture can socialize new people into the right ways of behaving and thinking that will be productive and satisfying. That is a human capability. And that's something that we can make use of in business. If we engage that strength in business, it can be a good thing. Team creativity and innovation. Teams of people can work together to do something new, to do something creative, to innovate. A new solution to a problem, a new way to produce value for customers. When teams do that, that can be highly satisfying. That's a human ability that Lean seeks to engage. Teams can rise to a challenging goal. I have to confess, I'm a space nerd. I was a child in the 1960s and just really enjoyed the space program. I'm kind of a science person to start with. And now studying it in retrospect, you realize that this team of creative professionals got together and said, how are we going to put somebody on the moon and bring them home safely? We've only got 8 years. How are we going to do that? And they came through and got it done using the team creativity and innovation to meet this challenging goal, a goal that might seem like it's a little out of reach. Let's put our heads together, let's put our talents together, and let's get that done. That is a human capability. If we can engage that somehow in business, that's what we're going for. And then finally, didn't know whether to make this a separate item or just to say, this sums up a bunch of this. It does both. Team learning. Teams can learn things. They can grow. They can get better. They can learn physical skills. They can learn ways of thinking. They can learn how to operate themselves. Teams of people can learn things, and should. And becoming a learning organization is about getting to where, yeah, that describes what we're doing. So we want to engage that too. So the lean business approach says, all right, look at all these strengths and abilities, and maybe I'm missing some of them. I've been thinking about this for a couple of years, so I think I have a pretty good list here. If we can engage those abilities, we're going to go places. If we can get those people doing this as they create value for customers, we're going to be more successful than if we just focus on raising revenue, lowering costs. Right? When they succeed at these things, they're going to raise revenue and lower costs. But we're going to get farther if we engage this and focus on this than if we focus only on the numbers. So, an organization that does all these things is a learning organization. So, the lean approach here, this is the contrast between how we go about doing business. The lean approach is, can you see that? I can hardly even see it. Satisfy customers, obviously. Engage all the human strengths. Leave it to Peter Drucker to have a good quote. The role of leadership, he says, is to make people's strengths productive and their weaknesses irrelevant. Love it. Good one to repeat every day. If you're a leader in an organization, make people's strengths productive. How can you organize things so that their strengths will be productive and that bad stuff that we talk about, the friction and confusion and underperformance, that we suppress that. We somehow build that so that just doesn't matter as much. That's what we're trying to do. The lean approach is to do that. And then finally, to aim the strengths at the problem solving and improvement opportunities that are going to make the most difference for our company. That's the lean approach to business. So let's take a little bit more of a look at this last team learning capability that I've mentioned. This is a powerful ability. The ability to learn. And the ability for a team to use their differing gifts to learn together. Let's say a defect occurs. I don't know if you can see it from there. Here's a sprocket or something with a gap in it. And a team that's taking a look at it, trying to do some problem solving. When a problem happens, a defect, the natural tendency, right? This is people left to themselves. The natural tendency is two thoughts. Who did that? Let's go give them a scolding, right? Let's tell them, bad, don't do that again. If you do that again, we're writing you up. The second natural thought is, all right, grab a good part, throw that in the scrap bin, grab a good part, let's get this order out the door. It's got to ship today. And then tomorrow you've forgotten about it. In a lot of organizations, that's where it ends. In a learning organization, you want to make sure that somebody puts effort into learning about the defect, and not just the QC department. Greg, are you in the room? I don't know if Greg's in the room. Not just QC. They have a role to play, obviously, but you want to somehow get the regular frontline part of the organization involved in learning something from this defect. There's a lot to learn. A whole lot to learn. So you identify a little team, and teams can, as we said, they can multiply their brain power as they learn. So there's all kinds of questions to ask. Sorry, I haven't been clicking. Great little quote there. Don't know where it came from. I've read it quoted by others. All of us together are smarter than any of us individually. All of us are smarter than any of us. So you put your team together and you can start asking questions about the defect. How often does this defect occur? Do we have any data on how often it occurs? Is there more of it downstream? Has it been occurring all day long and we just haven't noticed it till now? Maybe some of it went out the door. We better check on that. Was the incoming raw material okay? If it was, how did the defect must have occurred internally? Which process step was the point of cause? What exactly happened at that process step that caused a defect rather than a good part? We think that modifying the jig on the drill press is going to take care of this. So, what do we test? How do we test to see if that actually occurs? If that's actually going to fix the problem? If it works, if our countermeasure works, how do we remember to make future jigs the new way? See, these are the questions that learning is going to answer if you're a learning organization. Here's another one, going a different direction. Okay, Fred here on the team, he's kind of socially awkward, doesn't say much, but he nailed the cause when we were analyzing it. He did blurt something out, and it turned out that was the key point. What if Fred has other insights, but he's kind of afraid to share them? How can we make it easier for him to speak up when he's got ideas? Right? So you can learn something about team dynamics. If you're a learning organization, you want to do all those things. You want to get to the root of all these problems. That's the kind of thing a learning organization is trying to do. All right, some things that is required if you're going to become a learning organization. Everyone thinking, right? Brain on, not brain off. A few things about this. Henry Ford supposedly said, every time I try to hire another pair of hands for the factory, a whole person comes with them. Well, great. You know, the lean perspective is great. Let's make use of the whole person. And everyone we hire comes with one of these. Right? Everybody we hire's got one. Let's see if we can use it. Let's have them leave it switched on when they come to work every day. Have it switched on when they come back from break to their workstation. Let's help them get their brain in shape so that they can use it for the good of the team. You don't have to have a great brain to be part of a team learning and innovating and meeting a challenging goal. You can have a regular brain. Most of us have just regular brains. But you do have to have some things in the environment. One thing is a lot of organizations that I work with, when they start down the lean journey, they realize they've hired doers, right? We want you to come in and do, right? Henry Ford's pair of hands. Now, going forward, we want thinker-doers. We don't just want doers. We want people to use their brain and their hands, their muscles. So, saying that up front when you hire, hiring for it. Now, Kristen, she's doing the next talk. She's going to talk about hiring. How do you hire for both hands and a brain? And then you got to create an environment where people want to use their brain. We don't want artificial intelligence here at this company. We want real intelligence, actual human intelligence. Artificial intelligence is this hope for the future. Maybe it can help, certain things soon. I don't know. I'm not hearing a lot of evidence of that. Here's what we've got. At Superior, about 300 brains. We've got about 300 brains. Let's get them into shape to work together to make things better. That's the lean approach. So one of the things that you need for team learning is everybody thinking. You're trying to get everybody to think. You don't want to make it that the leaders think and the doers do. We want everybody to be thinking. So the next thing you need is a low blame culture. When you have a high blame culture, and I've been in some organizations like that, oh boy, that shuts down thinking in a hurry. You won't become a learning organization unless you can clear that out of the way. Team learning requires a low blame culture. Blame prevents learning. You've got to get blame out of the way if you're going to get any learning done. If you're going to be able to look at your process and say, how can we make this better? Or why did it go wrong in this particular way? And then ultimately that should make the company do better as well. You've got to get blame out of the way. Respect for people is a core value in Lean. I come from a Christian, biblical Christian worldview. I think this is just another name for the second great commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. So respect for people, it assumes that the people that you've hired want to succeed. If you hired right, they generally want to succeed. Right? Otherwise, if you hire somebody that doesn't want to succeed, that was a bad hire. Shame on you. You should have figured out who that person is. And once again, Kristen, next session, she's going to talk about how to filter through people so that you can get the ones you want. If you hire right, people want to succeed. So here's a question to ask. Instead of when a defect occurs, instead of saying, who did this? Bad person. You say, okay, what in our process caused a person who wants to succeed to fail? We should give them a process that helps them succeed. They want to. Let's figure out how to change the process so that it's easy to do right and hard to do wrong. You can do this. People working in this very area have done this in shipping. They've looked at process. When they make mistakes, they've looked at their process and say, all right, how can we redo this so that it's easier to do right and harder to do wrong, and our error rate goes down, and they've been successful. You can do this. If you take that approach, if you're in a blame culture, this feels awfully wrong to do what I've just said. But if you can put that aside, you can make real progress getting processes that help people succeed. People who want to succeed. And that is a positive thing. So, for team learning, you need a low blame culture. Right? The first reaction when something goes wrong isn't blame, it's, how did that happen? Right? Something's not working the way we wanted it to. The third thing you need is genuine teamwork. And then this is getting to the attitudes that need to be in place so that you can get that people effect. There's an old fable about 6 blind people walking up to an elephant. They don't have their eyes, so they feel the elephant. So the one who walks up to the tail says, oh, an elephant is like a rope. Yes, I felt it with my own 2 hands. An elephant is like a rope. Right? The one that walks up to the leg. An elephant is like a tree. An elephant is like a wall. The ear. An elephant is like a sail. An elephant is like a spear or a hose. Right? And the point of the fable is people have different perspectives on life. They see things from different angles. And I'd like to change this just a little bit to make this point about teamwork. 6 people working as a team, 6 blind people working as a team, their job is to go up to this elephant and describe, as a team, come up with a description. What is this elephant like? If they are going to succeed, what attitudes do they have to have? Right? If he's independent, he's going to say, when he hears that it's like a sail or a spear, he's like, that's stupid. I know it's like a rope. I felt it with my own 2 hands. Right? And the one in front says, "What have you been smoking?" It's like a spear, right? I know it's like a spear. I experienced it myself. Dude, wall is the only word for it, right? So if people are operating independently, not going to get it done. What is a team? What attitudes are needed to do this as a team? Anybody want to throw out some ideas? Well, here's my list so far anyway. Each person needs to be able to say, on a team, if the team's going to function, each person needs to be able to think about themselves. I don't have the whole picture. I'm only seeing from my perspective, my gifts, my worldview, my limited ability. I'm only seeing part of the picture. There's probably a bigger picture. I need my teammates to get that bigger picture. I better listen to them when they share and trust that they are sharing their honest perspective on what the elephant is like. Right? If I'm the rope guy, I really need to listen to my teammates at a different place on the elephant if I'm going to find out what the whole thing is like. My ideas will be adjusted, almost certainly. Debate ideas, but not personal attacks. Right? Don't attack motives. You always think everything's like a wall. Right? You want to debate the ideas. Look, I know there's a rope. There's at least part of this elephant that's like a rope. Right? Okay, well, there must be another part that's like a tree. So they need to debate, right? The person with the rope, he can't just shut up and say, "Oh, well, I don't have any of the picture." No, he's got a part of the picture, should say something. So if the team's going to function, if a team is going to get that draft horse effect, it's going to need a set of attitudes along these lines here. Right? And this comes down to some humility, some interdependence, rather than independence. So, those are some attitudes. So, if you want to do team learning, everybody thinking, low blame culture, and some genuine teamwork along the lines I just shared. Those are some important things to get an organizational learning culture. A few other things that are necessary. You need some built-in systems to learn. I'm not going to build this out. Most learning in an organization is done through problem solving. Right? You try to make product for customers. You run into difficulties. You go to work on those difficulties. That's when you learn stuff. Right? I'm not going to build out why I believe that's true. I believe it's true. And so you need built-in systems to learn by problem solving. And here's what I mean by that. People are not naturally good problem solvers. We naturally jump to conclusions. We have biases. There's all these things. To become good problem solvers, we need some training. We need some adjustment, same as with teamwork. And so the human system, somewhere in an organization, the human system has to do training on good problem solving. So there needs to be some system to train people to be problem solvers, develop problem solvers. You need a production system that highlights problems rather than hiding them. A lot of organizations, they run into problems because there's a high blame culture. You don't even want to bring it up. You want to ignore it, so you hide it. If you make a mistake, you don't say something about it because you might get scolded. You hide problems, or you just throw it away and use a good one. Just make 5% more than you need, knowing you're going to have defects. So in my mind, one of the brilliant things about the lean approach is let's build a production system that brings problems to the surface, and we almost delight in bringing problems to the surface. Because if you've got problem solvers, they can work on those, and you can make progress. Then you need a leadership system that can take the problems, get them on a list, and prioritize them. Right? Maybe along with improvement opportunities. All right, here's the problems we're having, here's opportunities we have for improvement. Which of these things are the important ones to work on next? So that's what I mean by a leadership system to focus on priority issues. Then a knowledge system to capture and spread the results of the things that you learn. I should say, I forgot to mention, as part of this, you want to build time into your daily work for working on problems and improvements. If all of your time must go to production, you're going to be doing a lot of firefighting and be frustrated. Instead, you've got to somehow build time in. There's got to be some people in the organization who can really focus on daily problem solving and daily improvement. So anyway, to be a good learning organization, you're going to need these systems in place at some level in order to be a learning organization. All right, learning. What was that last point there? I'm going to skip that. Learning must be retained. How do you retain what you learn? You do problem solving, you learn something, by the next day, people have forgotten it. How do you retain learning? Well, there's a number of ways. One is through standards, SOPs, standard ways of organizing things or conducting processes. So that's just simply documenting, this is the best known way to organize this workstation. So standardizing means putting labels on. It might be as simple as a hook for a hammer with an outline of a hammer drawn on the background. This is where the hammer goes. Might be complicated. A detailed inspection instructions and a drawing for incoming materials. Here's how we qualify that the material coming in is what we need to do what we need to do. All of those things are standards. Getting those standards somehow written down or recorded so that we don't just go off and do them other ways, that's important. Otherwise you're going to lose the learning. Training people to those standards. You get a new associate, you train them. What are you training them to? You're training them to the standards. Or if you change the standard, you make some improvement, solve some problem, and you change the standard, you're going to have to go through and train your existing people to the new standard, the new, currently best known way to organize or do things. Another way to retain learning is through the culture. And sorry for the cheesy artwork. Maybe more of it's cheesy than that, but I thought, that's weak. But I didn't have another one, so I put that one in. A good culture, if you have a new associate coming into a good culture, the new associate sees existing employees sharing ideas that aren't even that great. And they don't get made fun of. They don't get smacked down. Oh, that's a stupid idea. What if it's an environment where everybody's sharing lots of ideas in the belief that eventually a good one is going to rise to the surface? So a new associate comes in, that's the culture, he or she sees it, and after a while they're going to think, oh, that's what we do around here. You see how that's preserved some learning? The learning that we share every idea we have, and eventually the less than good ideas are going to trigger a good one, and the team will succeed that way. That's something to be learned. So you learn that, it gets to be part of the culture, and it's passed on just by everybody doing it that way. A new associate sees coworker notify leader of a mistake that she made, but she doesn't get scolded or reprimanded. That says we have a low blame culture around here. You can make a mistake, you should let them know, so that we can go to work and learn something from it. The culture can retain some of these things. And then finally, you might have a formal learning retention system, some kind of a knowledge base. I know back in the 80s, I worked at a company that, I was in the engineering department of a company that made medical equipment. We made equipment for hospitals to use to accurately measure oxygen flow rate. So we had to learn in-house how to measure oxygen flow rate extremely accurately. And we didn't break any brand new ground, but we learned a lot, and eventually I wrote up a little kind of an internal white paper on what we had learned so that future engineers could get that out and know what was going on. So some kind of knowledge retention system. I guess you got to be careful with the laser checking it like that. All right, so learning has got to be retained. All right, what if you are successful becoming a learning organization? What does that look like? Well, you'll be successful in business. You're likely to be successful in business because what kind of an organization is going to be good at handling the unexpected, chaotic business environment we're in now? You know, who's going to be more agile? People that are stuck in their ways, they just do what they're told, or people that are good at learning things and changing? It's going to be the learning organization. Generally, a learning organization, I mean, it takes quite a bit of an investment to get there, but generally a learning organization is going to do better with basic productivity than the competition. A learning organization is sustainable. If you get that built, a learning organization, it's going to take you on into the future because you'll be able to innovate. You'll be able to respond. You'll be able to adjust for a changing market or a changing regulatory environment or a changing economy because you're good at learning new things. So it's going to be sustainable. And then finally, it's going to be satisfying to all. I started with this picture of production, and I said, all right, so you satisfy customers, they're happy. You satisfy the ownership of the company, there's happiness there. Well, you know, what about the people doing the work? What about them? Well, here's the key point, and this is what excites and motivates me. If you engage all of the human abilities that I listed earlier, if you engage them so that people are doing them, for most people, I'm not going to say all, but for most people, that's going to be highly fulfilling. It's going to be very satisfying. I used my brain and my creativity with my teammates, and we met that challenge. We solved that problem. We improved the process. I mean, you got to pay people, but that's a priceless thing. They're happy to come to work if that's the normal environment. So generally, if you can get everybody in the organization doing that, remember the lean goal isn't just create an engineering department that are smart and they do the thinking and everybody else just does what they say. No, let's get everybody involved in solving problems and getting better. If you're successful at doing that, you're generally going to have a pretty happy workforce, and that's going to be satisfying. All right. So just to kind of sum up, the goal in Lean is to engage everyone to work as a team, create value, less waste, solve problems at the root cause, and get better every day. And being a learning culture and learning organization is a great summary of, of what that goal is. Questions? Comments? Yes, what's your name?
Hal.
Hal.
What do you do with people that don't fit that criteria?
Oh, they don't, they
So-
just want to work with their hands?
No, they just, there are people that say, hey, I just don't want to learn new things. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of the team. Let me do my job.
Okay.
Or they're just, they don't want to do their job.
Is Tommy in the room? Okay, he's not. Well, I would say, don't hire one. If you figure out that's what they're like, don't hire them.
Too late for that. But
Yeah, okay.
So you
Then,
want to change.
then I'd say, all right, let's try to motivate this person. They've got a brain. You don't have to be great at innovation and creativity to participate in innovation and creativity. And I'm a pretty firm believer that that human beings are designed to do those things, and if you can engage that and get them over the hump, they'll find it satisfying. I realize that's not true of everybody. You know, and then if you've got somebody, are you going to comment on that? Okay. If you've got somebody that just won't fit into that, you may be able to find something that they can do where they can contribute to sort of being on their own. Amos, your comment on that?
Yeah. So my comment on that is if the culture is right, those people take care of themselves. If they're comfortable, they may leave on their own, or they get back.
Yeah, Amos said for the recording, he said that if your culture is right, those people are either going to change or they'll leave on their own. So yeah, I'd be on that same page. Good question. Yes, Kristen.
I'm going to add to that. Pat Lencioni has a great book called The Ideal Team Player, and he basically talks you through what to do if you're in that situation. Really practical insights, and it's just like he said. If you handle it properly, they either will change or they will go.
Yeah, and I want to say, she mentioned, this is Kristen Dressler, mentioned the Pat Lencioni's book, The Ideal Team Player. Kristen is the one that told me about that book about 2 years ago, and it started me on the line of thinking that has resulted in a lot of these ideas. So appreciate that. Please stay for her talk next. And I think you'll learn a lot. Other questions or comments? All right, then. I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you found this helpful.